what's in it for me? And what's this got to do with Toastmasters? But not just what's in it for me. I want to look at it a little bit differently. What's in it for you and me, for you and me, and for you and me. So not just Wiifm, but what's in it for you and me. Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmaster, and most welcome guests. A lot of people wonder, what's in it for me? When they think about perhaps joining something like Toastmasters. But there's a big question, of course, and I'm going to try to address that by giving you a couple of examples of how Toastmasters has affected me, how it has benefited me, and I'm hoping that you can see perhaps how Toastmasters helped me could also help you and perhaps others that you may know. The first story is how I got started in Toastmasters. Many years ago, way back when the Chalk River Toastmasters was a very newly formed club, I was working at CNL in a building where most of the organizers for that club also worked, and a lot of them were my supervisors. And they had they knew me, and one year, one of my supervisors was giving me a merit review. Now, a merit review is where you sit with your supervisor and they look at the things you did last year, and they make suggestions about what you can do for next year to make what you did better. Well, my supervisor had this idea that perhaps if I was to join this Toastmaster group, then I would be able to communicate better with my colleagues, with my supervisors, and basically when it came to making decisions, we call that leadership, that I would have an easier time of doing that. Like, I got to admit, when it came to making decisions, quite often I would just back off and let somebody else make the decisions. And as such, a lot of work didn't get done. But at the time, while I had heard a little bit of people talking about Toastmasters, I was so terrified of public speaking and this whole leadership thing that I considered Toastmasters to be nothing but a bunch of sadists who would prop victims up in front of huge crowds and make them sweat blood. Needless to say, I wanted nothing to do with this group. And that just was not me. So I didn't take up the recommendation of my supervisor to join Toastmasters. Then the following year, a different supervisor, who also had some experience with the Toastmaster Club, also recognized that what I really needed was to have some additional skills that Toastmasters could give me. And that would help me with what I needed to do to get on with doing my job better each year. So he recommended that I join Toastmasters. Well, my attitude hadn't changed at all since the previous year, so I wanted nothing to do with this idea. And I don't think my feeling was very unique. Even many years after that, when I've been trying to get other people to come out as a Toastmaster guest, I think I'm seeing the same terror. People are afraid of public speaking. So I don't think I was unique at all in that. And I did not join Toastmasters. At least not then. But later on, fortunately, I had an opportunity to see a Toastmaster speech. It was actually a contest speech. How'd this happen? I was on a lazy Sunday afternoon. I was channel hopping through all the channels available on our cable system, and I would pause on each channel little longer than it took me to click on the remote control to move on to the next station. That's how bored I was with this whole thing. And then I came across the community channel. Here, I stopped. Perhaps because it was so different from those professionally made shows. This amateur production caught my attention. Here was a gentleman being depicted on the screen, standing on a makeshift stage. I think it was little more than a pallet. And he was describing his first skydive. In fact, he had his hands up on the, like in the air like this, as if he was holding on to the edges of a doorway of an airplane, high up in the sky. And he's describing that this was his first skydive. And then he leaned forward and did a little hop off the stage, like that. He put his hands up like this and said that he was now doing his first skydive. Wow. That caught my interest. Here was a gentleman giving a speech in a way that initially I saw a gentleman on a makeshift stage, but as he progressed, I then actually saw, in my imagination, him jumping out of the airplane. Huge. And I marveled to myself, could I tell a story that well? Could I be that effective? That would be a lot of fun if I could do that, wouldn't it, eh? Now, mind you, I was still terrified of public speaking, but it got me thinking along that line. Later the next week, I had a chance to speak to one of my friends who turned out to be a Toastmaster. And I got an invitation to not one club, but to two clubs. To the Chalk River Labs Toastmasters, as well as to the Deep River Toastmasters group. So I went out to both of those clubs to get a feel for what it's like to be in a corporate club and in an evening club for Toastmasters. I ended up joining the Chalk River Toastmasters because it's a bit more convenient to drop in to a quick meeting at work during my lunch break, rather than going out and making a special evening out. But they're both got the benefits. They're just very different, and I had to make a choice. At least I felt I needed to make a choice at that time, so I chose the Chalk River Toastmasters. That person who invited me to that later on became my mentor, and she made me feel very welcome to come out each week to the club meetings. And actually everybody at the meetings went out of their way to make room for me, to make me feel welcome as a new guest and as a new member. And when it came time for me to do my icebreaker, my mentor helped me practice to the point where I know I was just procrastinating, up to the point where I found myself behind the lectern about to give my speech. I remember my Toastmaster introducing me and basically giving me permission to proceed, and I read every word on that page. It wasn't the greatest page, but the expectations of your first icebreaker speech is just to speak in public. So it doesn't really matter how well you do it. It doesn't matter if you read it. It's just the fact that you're doing it. When I finished, my hands were sopping wet. My notes were sopping wet. But I'd done it, and I had that rush of feeling that I had achieved it. This was fantastic. I remember afterwards in the meeting, although it went by in a bit of a buzz, that I was congratulated and thanked for my icebreaker speech and for introducing myself to the club. Wow, that was fantastic. Things like that is why I kept going back to Toastmasters, and I enjoyed many, many meetings there. I went through the basic manuals and through the advanced manuals, and a lot of ways, of times, I learned different things. I enjoyed the meeting with the people, the camaraderie, meeting with the people, doing things together, holding contests, doing things, having that feeling of power, of being able to speak in public, to be able to do leadership. Yes, it was fun. All the way until I got my DTM. So Toastmasters has been good for me. It's helped me in a lot of different ways during my life. And I admit along the way too, I have tried to get other people to join. I've succeeded in sometimes. But a lot of times I come across the resistance that I too had felt when I first joined, well, was asked to join Toastmasters. It's a big problem getting people to come as a guest to see their first speech. But once they see it, I suspect most people, like me, will be very interested in continuing, and it'll be good for their career. Now you might ask, okay, it's good for your career. Just how good is it for your career? Well, there were many times during my career when it really benefited for me to have the skills that I've learned at Toastmasters. But there's one particular event where it really benefited for me, and it made a major change for me in my life. This particular time, I had been working on a major project at CNL. This major project was just suddenly slam closed. It was not proper closing a project. Nobody was ready for it. Often when a project comes to an end, somebody has started up another project, so there's places for people to go when they finish this project and go on to the next one. There was no such preparation. It was just bang. Suddenly you had people who had no work. Fortunately, our company decided that they would not lay anybody off. They would do what they had to do to find a place for everybody on that project somewhere on the site. Unfortunately, it would work out that there were a lot of square pegs being pushed into round holes and vice versa in order to do it. And that, of course, didn't help much later when it came to layoffs. If you were a square peg in a round hole, you were in trouble. In my position, I was being offered a very low technical entry-level job. I was a senior tech at that point, and the only job I was being offered was a low-level tech entry-level position. That was bad enough in itself, and I know I would not have liked that work. It would have been devastating, boring, an awful blow to me to do that. On top of that, the person currently in that job, which I would kick out, was a friend of mine. I did not want to do that. Fortunately, I had another option. At that time, technical staff could apply to professional positions, could compete for a professional position. Now, technically you could apply, but most applications, if you didn't have all the requirements, your application didn't even make it to an interview. In my particular case, one of the requirements is you had to be a graduate of a 4-year university, at least. I had a 3-year, not 4-year, 3-year. So that didn't work. Fortunately, with the experience and courage I had got at Toastmasters and the contacts I had made, I was able not only to apply, but to get an interview. Now, I got the interview because I knew the people likely to be on the interview committee because I'd met them at Toastmasters. Or I'd met them in some sort of similar event where I had volunteered and we had worked together. Because I had the skills to be a Toastmaster, I had made contacts with a lot of people at the level that I would be applying for this job. So I contacted those people, made sure I would at least get an interview. I got that by just simply talking to people. Then when it came to the interview itself, I was seeing a committee of 5 people. What did I do? Well, I walked right in and said hi to the people I knew and introduced myself to the people I didn't know on that committee. Wow. I would never have been able to do that before I had the skills that I had gained at Toastmasters. It would never have been possible. So here I am, having the interview. And one of the typical interview questions you get is, tell me a story. Hey, does this sound a little bit like table topics? I aced that interview. There was no question. When I left that, I was confident I had the job. And shortly afterwards, my contacts from that committee had contacted me personally to assure me that I had the job. Now, what did this mean to my career? I was pretty well at the top of the technical scale at that point, where walking on water and doing absolutely everything perfect, you get a tiny, tiny little increase. Well, I changed from that scale up and up to the professional scale, where if you just showed up every day and breathed, you got a huge increase every year. Needless to say, I did better than that. I did very well with my new position, with the skills I had, not just Toastmasters, but all the skills I had accumulated together added up nicely to what I needed for this new job. I excelled at that new job. I went up very quickly. I did very well in terms of earning money under the curve during the last few years I was a professional than I did during all the time I was a technical person, even though back then I really needed the money to raise a family. So I did very well after I got that promotion. In fact, I enjoyed myself so well that rather than retiring after I had 35 years in, I continued working another 7 years. So it was 43 years before I actually retired. Good times. So Toastmasters helped me a lot in my career. Do you know other people, perhaps yourself or other people you know, who are similarly having troubles with public speaking and leadership? They could benefit a lot by showing up at Toastmasters and gaining the skills we got there. Now, I know it's difficult. Anybody's welcome to use this video, if they figure it'll help, to introduce people, potential guests, to get them interested in coming out to a meeting where they could see just what Toastmaster could have in it for them. So answering the question, what's in it for me? You can show them Toastmasters can help you with your career. It can help you with your personal life. It's helped me with both. Gives me the confidence to do a lot of different things in life that I would not have been able to do before that. Life is a lot better with the skills that I accumulate at Toastmasters. Did I also mention that when I show up to Toastmasters each week, I not only recognize friends and help friends, I also have a good time. Toastmasters has really helped me a lot in my life. So what am I asking people to do? I'm asking people, what's in it for you and me? Well, take a look at what was good for me in this speech and see how it could apply to you or perhaps to other people that you know. And it'll help them. It'll help us. Now, keep in mind, too, that Toastmasters is an all-volunteer organization, at least at the lower levels. And as such, you need to have new people joining all the time because people are leaving for various reasons. So without getting guests in every week, the clubs get fewer and fewer people. And it takes a volunteer organization. It requires a lot of volunteers to make it work properly. So I'm asking people to concentrate, to give it some effort, to do what you can to talk up Toastmasters, like I'm doing right now in this speech. Talk up Toastmasters to anybody who you can get to listen. Get them to become involved in what's going on in many different parts of their life by becoming a Toastmaster. To come out to meetings, see some of those speeches that made a big difference for me, and have a lot of fun while you're doing it. So again, everybody, talk up Toastmasters. Let everybody know what's in it for you and me. Madam Toastmaster.